Welcome back to the Backseat Startup Podcast with your host, Andrew Hutton.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Backseat Startup Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Hutton, and I'm on and joined by Brian Mohr, co-founder of Anthym, which is a really exciting startup. I love that we get to talk to such a diversity of founders building different types of startups, and what Brian's building is definitely near and dear to me, in that he's been solving such problems of connectedness for teams that have gone remote or are choosing to be remote, and he got started before the pandemic. So I'm really excited for Brian. Brian, thank you for being on the show. I'm excited to dig into Anthym, excited to do what we do and share some advice and wisdom with the world. But yeah, thanks for being here. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. Great to be here with you, Andrew.
Awesome. So excited to dive in. But before we do and get to the thing we do, which is share some advice to founders by answering some questions from the folks on Reddit in the Wild West over there, I want everyone to get to know you a little bit and what you've been building. So tell us a little bit. Just give us the elevator pitch. What is Anthym? What are you building? What are you doing?
Yeah, Anthym at its core is a team connection platform, and we've chosen the workplace as our initial vertical to go after. As you had mentioned, a lot of organizations and teams have chosen remote first or geographic distributed, workforce model. And while there's a lot of benefits to that, one of the downsides is a growing sense of isolation or disconnection that can creep in and obviously hurt team culture, and the ripple effects that can happen from a less than amazing culture can be pretty devastating. So we built a platform and a way to help people connect regardless of where they're living or working geographically, to really build those deeper, more meaningful relationships. Because if you have friends at work, it becomes that much more difficult to want to leave. And then the work product is better because you enjoy the people you're working with.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So there's so many threads to pull, but I think, just in like the most meta, we are living through, and it's not been just this week, like this, we went through this whole season of remotes and where it was this massive accelerant. So many startups were truly pushed forward by solving problems of whether it's remote work or just a new style of working through the pandemic. But now we're also going through this reckoning of whether it's return to the office or, just obviously the economy is in some ups and downs. And so, yeah, I think we're not necessarily in the new world order, but we're still working through this evolution. Obviously remote's not going away entirely, right? I imagine everyone listening has been on a remote team at some point and kind of wanted those like connections when they like the work friends they made in the office, going to happy hours, just, going out for lunch. I miss it. and I remember a few experiences on different teams I was on during the pandemic, and I think they were getting at a lot of the things you do. So take us under the hood. So you mentioned what you're here to do with Anthym, right? Which is bring these folks connected. How do you do it? And yeah, tell us like what happens when someone uses or has an experience with Anthym.
Yeah, the Anthym idea was born out of an experience that my co-founder and I had being forum mates in an entrepreneur forum, a peer-to-peer forum of about 10 people. And what we recognized as participants in this forum was that the deep, deep level of trust that we were able to build allowed us to create breakthrough results for one another in solving our respective, whether they be personal or professional challenges that we brought to the table. And so leveraging the power of that experience, what we decided to do was bring it to the workplace, and knowing that, just back of the envelope, that half the people in the world are likely going to be a bit shy and reserved, and the other half are going to be a bit outgoing and gregarious. How do we help everybody participate in an experience where they can get beyond their job title persona or their LinkedIn persona and actually learn about one another as the human beings that they are? And so what we stumbled into was leveraging the power of music as a door opener. We've yet to meet anybody that we've worked with in the past 3.5 years who doesn't like music. So it's this art form that has touched all of our lives. And what's really powerful about music, Andrew, is not only is it universal in its connectiveness, its language capability, but it's like one of our best time machines that we've ever created. And it certainly wasn't created to be a time machine, but that's just one of the byproducts of it, where if you and I were to hear a song that reminds us of an experience in our life, we go back to that moment in time instantaneously and can relive it as if it were happening again. And so we use music to help people reconnect with important lessons, stories, experiences, or eras from their life, and then bring those to the team, and they exchange in a music and storytelling experience. And what happens is, because the music is such a safe, fun, easy thing to talk about, even the most reserved people come out of their shell and don't even realize that they're talking more about who they are, not what they are.
Yeah, I imagine everyone listening is sort of like nodding along, having a flashback, because oh my gosh, there's so many threads to pull on that, because I resonate so much with that. Like, there's that universality to music, right?
Yep.
I was, when we were chatting before we started recording here, in my, journey through the pandemic, I was a part of so many different online everythings, right? We ran a community, we were hosting so many workshops, we hosted all these icebreaker types, these, virtual happy hours. And there was a tool we used that very much, it wasn't actually even meant for music, but there was a moment and there was like a waiting room where like you could play a song, and that was almost the most fun part, because you played like a funky old like Britney Spears song or something, like an NSYNC song, and everyone's like, and everything you said. And so I think I am just resonating so much with that like experience and how it can transcend virtual. The other thing I'll reflect on, something that I believe really strongly, is that yes, in professional settings, here's the saying that I've like kind of preached to a lot of people: relationships catalyze growth. And I would say that to folks in the context of virtual communities, being like, if you want to like be a better entrepreneur, so this sounds like exactly your EO experience, right? If you want to be a better entrepreneur, it's not just about transactionally sharing advice. It's about getting to know people at a way that moves the needle. It really moves the outcomes. And so you're bringing that into businesses, right? Where
100%.
So the maybe not the last question, but the next question I wanted to ask you is, like, you kind of said there's outcomes here. You can create stronger teams. You can create, actually even better work. Like, what have you seen? Can you like give some color or quantify that? Like, what happens when teams do this thing, get to that stage? Like, how do you paint the picture of the outcome for people?
Yeah, I think it shows up in a few different ways. And you can look at some fairly black and white metrics like retention. Does retention go up as a result of this? Does employee engagement go up as a result of this? Does the trust level between teammates go up as a result of this? Does the interdepartmental teamwork between the XYZ team and the ABC team get better as a result of them building deeper relationships? And one of the things similar to what you said, relationships catalyze growth, is we say relationships are the foundation of all accomplishment. We've all heard the old proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. And like this idea, especially given the sheer number of hours of our lives that we spend at work, for it to not be a fertile place to create really good relationships is such a missed opportunity, because of the better retention, the better engagement, the better productivity outcomes. And it also adds more joy and happiness to our own lives. And there's a lot of really compelling research and data that proves over and over again that the happiest, healthiest people are those that have deep, meaningful relationships. And the workplace, for so many of us, is the primary place where we can build connections with other people.
Yeah, I think you're solving one of these, for a lot of us who, opted in and have really enjoyed the trade-offs of working remote, right?
Yep.
No commutes, getting to see family around all the time. The major trade-off is that office culture, right?
Yep.
And the positives, and it's both like productivity positives, right? Like the tighter team can work, towards outcomes, and just like you said, relational, and that like just breeds into your. So I'm so here for this. Last question before we jump to the second segment of what we do here is, so where are you in the journey? So you and your co-founder have been building Anthym for a minute. Where are you in the journey, and kind of what's coming up for you all?
Yeah, so we did a variety of friends and family stuff to obviously get us to this point. A big part of our early history was validating whether or not this experiment could lead to building a scalable business. And so here we are, having just graduated from Techstars Anywhere earlier this year. We're in the midst of a pre-seed raise. It's an interesting time to be raising right now, but that's where we are in the journey. So we're looking for folks that see the bigger vision behind this, both in the workplace, and we've also been, keeping our eyes open to what other verticals and what other areas where people are coming together, where could the outcome of what they're there to do be improved if they were able to build better relationships and connections with one another. So the workplace is the starter, go to market, but there's other things that we know this platform and this experience can do, whether it be higher education, whether it be nonprofits.
Oh,
I mean, there's a lot.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of opportunity here. So we're excited.
That's really, really cool. Okay. Well, actually, so we're going to jump over to, like I said, we're going to switch gears a little bit. Thanks for unpacking all of that. It's really exciting what you're building. I'm glad everyone listening really gets to know what you're up to. We'll make sure to come back at the end and make sure they know how to find you and where they can kind of get involved. But let's jump over. I'm going to get my screen sharing. I've actually found a question that I'm excited for you to answer because of what I know about your journey. And we won't necessarily hold ourselves to the letter of the question, but we'll use it to guide our topic. So this question right here: how did you start with your MVP? And I just know this is a juicy one because I know how you started with well, I'll let you tell the story of how you started, but one, I want to hear how you started with your MVP, and then because that's really what the question says. But what are the lessons from that? How would you advise others to think about MVP and getting started? And you just use all the right words: validating, early stages before you put your foot down on the pedal, and going through Techstars. It sounds like you did everything right. How did you do it? And then let's see if we can't generalize into some lessons for some folks.
Yeah, cool. So our initial MVP was analog, to say the least. So what we decided to do to test the idea was my co-founder and I reached out to somewhere in the vicinity of 40 or 50 folks from our respective networks. This was right about 2 or 3 months into the pandemic. And we asked all of them if they'd be willing to devote 90 minutes of their time to show up to a Zoom meeting. And as the pre-work or homework and showing up to the meeting, we asked each of them if they would show up to the meeting with 5 memories from their life that they would be excited to share with total strangers, and then the song that corresponds or is the soundtrack of each one of those memories. And so we had about 40 of the 50 people show up. And we immediately kind of set the stage and then put people into breakout rooms of about 4 or 5 people per room with very light instruction, but enough to get them going to say, hey, we want you to go exchange stories and music with one another in these breakout rooms. And we weren't sure, we were freaking out when we sent them to breakout rooms. We had no idea what was going to happen. We were hopeful, but still had no idea. When they came back to a person, everybody was like, holy cow. I just shared memories and stories from my life with strangers that people who I've known for decades don't know about me. So whatever it is you just did, it worked. And so that gave us the confidence to then take this idea of having a place where a platform where people could catalog their stories and the songs that connect to those stories, and essentially building this soundtrack of their life profile. And then from there, tested that. And here we are today with a variety of group functionality and a whole bunch of other things that we've layered on top.
I love it. I'm like a student of the venture game, and one of the MVP types that I always guide people through, if there is that element of is that we call it a Wizard of Oz MVP. I'm sure you've heard that statement, right? Anyone, if you haven't, the idea being the Wizard of Oz, there's a person behind the animatronic everything, right?
Right.
And this is even lower fidelity than even that, right? Because you're not even trying to hide, right? You just ran a workshop, but it got, so there again, I don't want to be there's so much in what you said that I could unpack about why that was a great MVP, right? Because you were basically approximating, you were getting the value out of the core thing, whether there was no tech platform, it was Zoom, it was whatever, right?
That's exactly right.
How
Because
did
at the end of the day,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, what we wanted was we could have had the fanciest technology in the entire world, but the end result is about human to human connection. And so if the technology didn't enable or accelerate that, the technology would be worthless. And so we had to determine whether or not the idea, technology or not, would actually get to the end result.
And that's honestly, I there's 95% of startups, the technology, like the true technology, whether it's the lines of code, even even if it's an AI thing, even if it's novel, even if you have this breakthrough, is purely just like a delivery method for the thing, right? The thing being swipe left, swipe right, the thing being connect with your peers, the thing being something very, SaaS workflow, B2B, right? Like you're helping somebody. And so how did that help you move forward? So like walk us through that. So you did the thing. So your MVP was a live Zoom workshop.
Yep.
What did that enable you to do? You said you got really positive feedback, but I'm sure you got play it forward. What does an MVP when it works help you do as a startup, as a founder?
Yeah. So, what it does to help us as a founder is whether or not it helps the individuals that obviously are using the tool. And so getting the positive feedback we received from that test group gave us the confidence. I think is the biggest thing is it gave us the confidence to go build this really simple platform that much like, a profile that you would build, but this sort of deeper human level profile that, as we've learned, really, there's kind of two parts to what we do. Part one is this sort of trip down memory lane, self-reflection exercise. It can almost be meditative in nature, especially for the people who like music, which is a lot of people. I mean, it's a pretty big audience. So we've got that going for us. We've not met any music haters yet. So going through that experience, for so many people who are running so quickly through their life and taking very little time to pause, to give people a moment or an opportunity to hit the pause button, do some self-reflection, think about stories that have been meaningful and significant, music that's been accompanying their journey, is a really cool thing to do in and of itself, right? And then from there, knowing that we could nail that, that became simply, okay, once people are building their individual profiles, how do we connect them together? How do we look at commonalities that people might share, whether it's life experiences or stories or the music that they've consumed, and begin to sort of surface what we like to refer to as uncommon commonalities that people share that have always been hiding in plain sight. But until you had something really easy, safe, and fun like music to talk about, to unearth them, you never would have known this about your teammates. And so I think the biggest thing to answer your question, Andrew, is it gave us the confidence to build it, knowing that it worked.
Yeah, that's fundamentally how, oh my gosh, I'm just going to like yes and all of that, because the confidence, whether it's confidence like personal confidence or just like clarity, this is the thing to build, right?
Yeah.
We thought it was this, now we know it's this.
Yeah.
There's language that I usually use with founders, which is like you're validating assumptions. You thought it was this, that's an assumption. You might have a lot of reason to think so, but until it happens and you get that feedback, you really should take it. You should, it's what is that? Is like strong convictions held loosely. You should hold those convictions until you get data.
Yep.
Right. And man, there's something about, actually, question here is, one of the things that I run into, and I know lots of founders run into, is you do something and the data is murky, right? So it sounds like you had decently strong data, right? Meaning like, very consistent across the board, very strong in its like nature, even if it was only 40 people or 50 people. How many of these did you run? Like how did you answer that question of like, is our data valid? Do I have enough? Like, do I need to do 10 of these to feel confident? Was it just one? Like, again, you might be the outlier where like, again, actually, if you are the outlier, I'm actually really glad to put it on the table. Because if you're this person asking this question and you do an MVP and it doesn't feel like what Brian just did, you're not there yet, right? So anyway, unpack that for us. Like, how did you know you had it? And what else did you do?
Yeah, I guess, to some degree, we were incredibly naive in thinking running one and getting the feedback that we got was sufficient for us to have that, again, confidence to build it. And that's exactly what happened. We ran one and it worked. And I think as I look back on, it's a great question. And I haven't thought much about it since that time because it's just been go, 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 go ever since. I think part of why we felt so confident is twofold. Number one, we just believe that music is a powerful language that everybody can connect to. Like that's just, it's universal. So we felt really good on that. But number two, and this is what I hadn't really reflected on until you asked the question, is the diversity of people we had in that initial workshop. And I don't mean diversity just in what most people who think or hear the word diversity go to. It's like different industries, different levels of leadership, different, think about all the different differences that you could get together. And given how wide a distribution of types of people we had and irrelevant of where they were, the industry they were from, the tenure that they had, it worked for all of them. And so we're like, shit, we got to do this. Like, let's just go do this. And we also, given that the pandemic was, in its early days, we felt like the time was now, like strike now, because we don't know how long the pandemic was going to last. We don't know how long this isolation, physical distance thing was going to go on. So let's just get moving and bring this to market and see what happens.
Oh, I appreciate you bring that side of the question in, which is, MVPs, the whole thought process, the whole methodology, right, is about learning. It's about confidence building, validating assumptions, everything we just described. But it's not about certainty, right? It's not about this is going to work and 100%. There's like no chance it doesn't, right? It's about giving yourself, and there's so much about entrepreneurship that's like a little less than rational. It's a little bit of like I can live with myself if it doesn't work, because we had some pretty good signals that it would, right? But every entrepreneur is making a little bit of a leap of faith, right? And so you get yourself going, you're making a leap of faith. Eventually you're getting other people to make a leap of faith, whether it's team members, whether it's investors. And that's just the nature of entrepreneurship, right? So that's the yin and the yang. I appreciate you bringing that up, right? So no, if you're listening, don't think MVPs get you to certainty. MVPs get you learnings to take the next step, right? And then, like you said, sometimes it is opportunistic and just moving fast, striking when the iron's hot. Last thing, because again, because that was early on, and you've been at this game for a minute now, and I'm sure maybe you haven't had that kind of moment of like super scrappy MVP, right? But what I think about startup life is that like there's lots of you're learning every single stage of the game, right? You don't just like put your blinders on and execute for like 3 years, right? So I'm curious of how if you've had any of those experiences since then, right? Whether it's like we tried this thing. Maybe it was an MVP of a go-to-market and you tried a podcast. I don't know, right? Like this could be your MVP for all we know, right? But yeah, how was that kind of carried forward? Whether it's just the thinking or even some of the tactics, it's been a journey since that initial thing.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things. Number one, at the most fundamental level, when we designed this, we designed it to be delivered to teams and then for teams to self-deliver in the virtual world, knowing that there was a lot of organizations out there that had gone remote. And we're not saying you should be or shouldn't be. I don't have a horse in the race. People are making their own decisions, whatever works best for their organization, their clients, their culture. About a year and a half ago, we had some clients say, hey, we're doing an offsite retreat. We're actually getting together again. And we want to do this. And it was like this sort of moment of like, oh, can we do this in person? Like we've designed it for this one use case. Could we do? And so we gave it a shot and it blew us away how powerful the experience was in person, which shouldn't shock me in hindsight. But still, I, as much as I am a believer in the benefits of remote work, there is no substitute for being in the same room with people. There just isn't. I'm a big believer of that. So that's my bias. The second thing and shame on me for not thinking about this, is while we were building this and delivering this to teams that are already in place, it had never occurred to me, and again, I'm so embarrassed by this, that if you are hiring somebody brand new, and you're hiring them in, Boise, Idaho, and they're never going to meet their teammates in person for some extended period of time until the next get together. Well, why not use the same thing to allow them to onboard? And I don't mean onboarding like get your passwords and your benefits paperwork, like that onboarding stuff's important. But what about the human centricity? Like, how do you introduce somebody, help them accelerate their sense of belonging and connection when they're not going to be in the same room with their teammates? And how do you get that exchange of people knowing one another through a video screen to happen in the shortest time possible so that you can up their level of productivity, make them feel like they belong, lower their flight risk because they just don't feel like they're building relationships, and it's way too easy to go get another job remotely if you're not feeling it. And so clients, it took more than I care to admit for them to say, can we do this for onboarding? And finally we're like, I guess we should build an onboarding product. And so that was a really, really big learning that came through this.
Yeah. And there's just, again, the fundamental thought is when you're doing it and it's live, and an MVP is about being minimal enough that you get in the game, right?
Yeah.
Because the learnings you get when you're in the game, whether it's running that first really scary workshop or it's just working with clients and then them saying like, hey, I think you should build this because we need it, because we want it, right? Yep. And then just building what people want. That's the whole Y Combinator model. Build something people want, and it's the business boils down to that in some ways. So I'm really excited. I'm really glad that the universe gave us that question because your experience really speaks to it perfectly. Brian, I'm really thankful that you joined today. As we wrap up, just want to make sure that we give you a chance to, where can people find you and Anthym, and just where should they go to get engaged or get involved?
Yeah. So, for anybody listening that wants to check out Anthym, best place to check it out is the site, anthym.life. And Anthym is spelled a little unique. The proper spelling of the word was taken, so that was a hard domain name to get. So we substituted the letter E at the end of Anthym with the letter Y. So it's Anthym, ANTHYM.life. Is the best place to learn about what we're up to, what we're doing. And then you can connect with me. I'm on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn, at Brian Mohr. My last name is spelled also a bit unique, Mohr. So all kinds of interesting spellings happening over
listen,
here.
You got to pay attention. If you find yourself on a health insurance site, you've gone the wrong way.
Exactly.
You've taken a left in Google when you should have taken a right.
Exactly.
Anthym with a Y, ANTHYM.life.
.life. Yep.
And Brian, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, sharing your story, sharing about Anthym and what you're building. And I can just imagine some folks listening, if this isn't you, and you almost certainly know somebody who's in charge of culture and connectedness at a remote company. So go check it out, sync up with Brian. And with that, we'll wrap it up. Thanks everyone for listening. Brian, thanks again last time, but thank you so much for spending time here, and really appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet, man. Thanks for having me.
The Backseat Startup Podcast is brought to you by StartupStage, formerly known as Startup Founder Daily. StartupStage is the place to showcase your startup and compete for features across our channels. Each week, users can vote for their favorite startups. The top 3 companies, as determined by the votes, are then selected for special features across our blog, podcast, newsletter, and social media platforms. Hit the link in the description below to apply.